Important notice. This video was designed as an auditory experience. While you listen, I will show some supporting visuals on the screen, but they are not directly related to the content being narrated. So I recommend you simply enjoy the experience and focus your attention on the audio. If you prefer, close your eyes, relax, and absorb the knowledge deeply and mindfully. Block 1. The obsession that became a mission. Napoleon Hill wasn't born into wealth or privilege. He started as a young journalist with more curiosity than credentials. But in 1908, one meeting changed everything. Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate who built a fortune that would rival kingdoms, invited Hill to his mansion. What began as a simple interview turned into an invitation that would redefine Hill's entire life. Carnegie looked him in the eye and proposed an idea no one had dared attempt. Spend 20 years studying the richest men alive, decode their habits, and create a philosophy of success anyone could follow. Carnegie believed wealth wasn't just circumstance or luck. It was a formula, an invisible code only a few understood. But he also knew most people were too lazy or too afraid to uncover it. Hill accepted the challenge, without salary or guarantees. Imagine the magnitude, interviewing Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Rockefeller, and dozens of self-made titans while having no wealth himself, just relentless conviction. This was the genesis of Think and Grow Rich, and the first proof that obsession is the starting point of all greatness. Carnegie's proposition to Hill wasn't a motivational speech. It was a declaration of war against the myth that success is random. He believed prosperity was a predictable outcome, a series of principles that, when applied with discipline, produced wealth as reliably as gravity pulls objects to the ground. Hill embraced this idea so fully that he spent decades proving it to skeptics who called him delusional. He started to see success not as an art, but as a science with laws as real as physics. If you followed them, you rose. If you ignored them, you sank, no matter how talented you thought you were. This mindset turned Hill into a collector of patterns. He catalogued hundreds of stories, looking for recurring behaviors, mental models, and decisions that separated the rich from the forgotten. He concluded that success was never luck. It was the child of clarity, persistence, and an unbreakable belief in the outcome, long before any evidence appeared. Unlike academics who studied success from the safety of libraries, Hill embedded himself in the lives of tycoons. He watched how they negotiated, how they treated employees, how they reacted to setbacks. He didn't just ask questions, he dissected routines. He recorded how often they read, when they planned, how they controlled emotions. His research was immersive, almost invasive. Hill understood that people often lied about why they succeeded. They romanticized hard work or luck, so he looked past their words and studied what they actually did. Over time, he noticed patterns no one else dared to document: the daily rituals, the quiet confidence, the brutal self-discipline, the refusal to waste time on trivialities. This methodology made his work radical. While others taught vague inspiration, Hill offered a precise blueprint, observed in the trenches, not imagined in theory. He proved success wasn't magic. It was measurable behavior, repeated with obsession. Hill discovered early that studying wealth invites hatred. Most people want to believe success is either corrupt or purely accidental, because that belief justifies their own mediocrity. If the rich were simply lucky or evil, no one had to change themselves. But Hill refused to flatter resentment. He approached every titan with respect, curiosity, and brutal honesty. He was criticized for glorifying the wealthy, for suggesting their strategies were worth learning instead of condemning. But he knew the truth. You cannot attract what you secretly despise. If you see wealth as dirty, you'll unconsciously sabotage your chance to build it. That's why Hill insisted on studying these men as case studies, not as villains or saints. He stripped away moral labels and focused on behaviors that produced results. This made his work controversial, but also made it timeless. Because while opinions fade, patterns endure. And the patterns of wealth are indifferent to your feelings about them. For years, Napoleon Hill was mocked as an opportunist chasing fantasies. Editors rejected his manuscripts. Critics called him naive for believing there was a formula to success. Even friends warned he was wasting his life documenting stories that sounded like myths. But while they laughed, Hill kept working. He built thousands of pages of notes, transcriptions, and interviews. He was broke more than once, living on borrowed money and sheer conviction. Then in 1937, when the world was drowning in the Great Depression, Hill released Think and Grow Rich. It didn't just sell, it exploded. Millions of copies crossed continents, translated into dozens of languages, reshaping how generations defined wealth. Those who ridiculed him had no answer when factories, bankers, and salesmen credited his principles for their revival. Hill had done what no critic dared. He turned observation into a system, and by proving his point, he gave ordinary people the tools to rise above the excuses that had kept them small. Block 2, the first principle, burning desire. Napoleon Hill didn't say you should want success. He said you must crave it so intensely it becomes oxygen, non-negotiable, essential, and impossible to ignore. He called this burning desire, a force stronger than circumstance or logic. Every empire, every fortune, every legacy began as an obsession that refused to die. Hill saw this in Carnegie, who started as a poor immigrant and became a steel monarch. He saw it in Edison, who endured thousands of failures because he was possessed by the idea of light. Desire is the seed of greatness, but most people never cultivate it. They dabble, test, and quit when it's inconvenient. Burning desire is different. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for validation. It devours doubt until there is nothing left but action. Hill taught that until you decide you'd rather fail trying than die wondering, you will remain average because lukewarm goals produce lukewarm results. Hill made a clear distinction most people never grasp. Wanting is casual. Needing is transformative. When you want success, you daydream. You say, it would be nice. But when you need it, you reorganize your life to get it. You sacrifice comfort, sleep, and approval. You stop negotiating with mediocrity. Hill observed that every wealthy person he studied had a moment when wanting became needing, when the goal was no longer optional. That shift changes everything. Your habits harden. Your discipline intensifies. You no longer tolerate distractions disguised as obligations. You say no without guilt. People call you obsessed because they can't understand needing something so much you'd burn your old life to get it. But Hill knew that's exactly what separates those who achieve from those who explain why they didn't. In the end, desire is only powerful when it evolves into necessity, and necessity, Hill insisted, is the mother of every triumph worth remembering. Hill didn't invent theories in an ivory tower. He collected proof from the trenches of ambition. He recounted how Edwin Barnes decided he would partner with Thomas Edison. Barnes had no money, no connections, and no special education. But he had desire so fierce it erased excuses. He traveled to Edison's lab and declared he would work for him, any position, any wage. For years, Barnes toiled unnoticed. Then one day, Edison needed someone to sell his new dictating machine. While others hesitated, Barnes seized the chance. He sold so many units that Edison made him a partner. Hill told dozens of stories like this, people with no advantages who outlasted luckier rivals. He documented Henry Ford's obsession with building a cheap car when experts mocked him. He recorded Carnegie's fixation on mastering steel. In every story, the pattern was clear. Desire wasn't a mood. It was a vow, a promise to keep going when no one clapped. Hill concluded that wealth doesn't come to the qualified, it comes to the relentless. Napoleon Hill was adamant. Wishing alone achieves nothing. Desire must crystallize into decision, a commitment so solid it becomes your identity. He taught that the bridge between wanting and having is built by clarity. You must define exactly what you want, when you want it, and what you'll give in exchange. Vague goals produce vague results. Specific goals create gravity. He recommended writing a clear statement, the exact amount of money you intend to earn, the deadline, and the plan to get there. This isn't a motivational gimmick. It's a neurological command. Repetition imprints purpose into your subconscious, so your mind starts hunting resources and opportunities. Decision requires burning the ships. When Cortés landed in Mexico, he destroyed his own boats, so retreat was impossible. Hill believed success demands the same mental finality. Until you cross the point of no return, desire is just an idea. Decision turns it into destiny. Hill didn't leave burning desire to chance. He gave precise steps to manufacture it. First, he urged people to write down their major goal on a card and read it aloud twice daily, morning and night. This constant repetition was not superstition. It was psychological programming, training the subconscious to accept the goal as inevitable. He advised visualizing the outcome vividly, seeing the wealth, feeling it, believing it before any evidence appeared. Second, he recommended creating a desire journal, where you track progress, setbacks, and insights. Reviewing it weekly strengthens conviction. Third, he encouraged associating with others who have similar ambition. Hill called it proximity of purpose, being around people who normalize high expectations. Finally, he insisted you detach from critics and cynics. Burning desire is fragile in its early stages. Doubt from others acts like water on fire. Protect your focus. Nurture it until it's so strong no opposition can extinguish it. That's when desire becomes destiny. Tos, Block 3, faith as a habit. When Hill spoke about faith, he wasn't talking about church or dogma. He was describing a mental certainty that your goals will manifest. He defined faith as emotionalized belief, the unwavering conviction that what you desire is already on its way. Faith is not passive hope, it's a force multiplier. Hill discovered that every industrial titan he studied operated with a core assumption. Their vision was as real as gravity, even when no one else believed. Faith doesn't remove obstacles, but it makes them irrelevant. It overrides fear and doubt. While others wait for proof to act, the faithful act until proof appears. Hill taught that this conviction is learned, not inherited. Anyone can cultivate it by controlling self-talk, directing focus, and practicing gratitude in advance. Faith is a discipline, like exercise. It grows stronger the more you train it. Without it, every setback feels fatal. With it, every setback feels temporary. That mindset is the true birthplace of wealth. Hill insisted that faith doesn't arise by accident. It must be cultivated deliberately through auto-suggestion, the process of feeding your mind instructions so often that it accepts them as reality. He compared the subconscious to fertile soil. Plant seeds of certainty, and they will sprout conviction. Plant seeds of doubt, and you harvest paralysis. Autosuggestion works through repetition and emotion. It's not enough to say affirmations mechanically. You must feel the words. When you declare, "I will achieve this," you must infuse it with desire so strong it electrifies your nervous system. That energy convinces the subconscious you are already living your goal. Hill recommended reading your written statements of intent aloud, twice daily, while visualizing the outcome in detail. Over time, this practice burns belief into your mind. Skeptics dismiss autosuggestion as naive, but Hill knew it was the hidden engine behind every unstoppable personality he encountered. Hill often cited Henry Ford as the embodiment of applied faith. When Ford decided to build his revolutionary V8 engine, every engineer told him it was impossible to cast all 8 cylinders in a single block. Ford listened calmly, then said, "Produce it anyway." The engineers returned months later, defeated. Ford repeated, "Build it." They protested again, but he refused to waver. Finally, after a year of relentless effort, they succeeded, because Ford's certainty never cracked under doubt. This is faith in action, refusing to adjust your vision to match other people's limitations. Ford didn't need evidence that it could be done. His belief created the evidence. Hill argued this example proves that faith isn't an abstract virtue. It's a tool, an operational mindset that compels reality to conform. While the timid wait for reassurance, the committed act as if success is inevitable. That posture attracts resources, talent, and solutions that would remain hidden to the hesitant. Faith, Hill concluded, is the invisible scaffolding of every empire. Hill observed that every great fortune began as an act of believing without proof. Faith, he said, is the seed that sprouts before you can see the plant. He noticed a predictable cycle. First comes an idea, then desire, then belief so strong it feels real, then action, long before the world validates it. Only after relentless execution does evidence appear. The mistake most people make is waiting for guarantees before committing. But wealth doesn't flow to the cautious. It flows to those who behave as if success is already inevitable. This is why Hill stressed the importance of acting the part. If you carry yourself with conviction, speaking, deciding, moving as someone who expects victory, people respond to your certainty. Banks lend, clients sign, partners align. Confidence is magnetic because it signals leadership. Faith is not a feeling you wait for. It's a decision you rehearse until it becomes your default state. This decision is the catalyst that makes dreams solid. Napoleon Hill knew faith wasn't something you woke up with. It was something you installed one day at a time. He recommended a set of daily rituals to make belief automatic. First, start every morning by reading your chief aim aloud, not a vague intention. A specific, measurable target he declared in the present tense. Example, I am earning $100,000 per year by December 31st. Repeat it with emotion, not monotony. Second, visualize the outcome in detail. See yourself closing the deal, receiving the deposit, celebrating milestones. The brain can't distinguish between real and vividly imagined experiences, so it builds neural pathways that expect success. Third, replace every negative thought with an empowering one. If you catch yourself thinking, I can't, immediately counter with, I am capable and committed. Fourth, surround yourself with reminders, sticky notes, wallpapers, symbols that reinforce certainty. Finally, end each day by listing small wins. Gratitude cements progress. Over time, these habits forge a mind immune to doubt. Block 4. Auto-suggestion. Hill believed the mind is like a fertile field that grows whatever you plant. Most people unknowingly seed it with fear, limitation, and excuses. Auto-suggestion is the deliberate act of replacing those weeds with convictions that serve you. He insisted that repeated thoughts, especially those charged with emotion, become beliefs, and beliefs become behaviors. Think about it. Every habit you have started as a repeated idea. Doubt is just faith in failure. So Hill taught that you must choose your mental repetitions. With the same care you choose investments. If you repeat, I'm not ready, or I never get lucky, your subconscious will prove you right. If you declare, I am becoming unstoppable, it will gather evidence to confirm it. Repetition rewires identity. That's why Hill recommended reciting affirmations daily, not because words are magic, but because they recondition the deepest layers of your mind. In time, your actions align with your declarations, and your life follows suit. Hill taught that autosuggestion is most powerful when it combines spoken words, visual images, and written declarations. Saying an affirmation out loud engages your physiology, your voice, breath, and hearing. Writing it activates motor memory, anchoring the idea deeper. Visualizing creates emotional charge, making the subconscious more receptive. He recommended choosing one clear goal and building a ritual around it. Start by crafting a precise affirmation. I am earning $10,000 a month doing work I love. Write this sentence by hand every day. Read it aloud morning and night. While you say it, close your eyes and see yourself experiencing it. Imagine the bank balance, the emails, the phone calls congratulating you. Feel the emotion of success, relief, pride, excitement. This multi-sensory approach floods your nervous system with the same signal from different angles. Over time, the repetition overrides old doubts. Hill stressed that consistency is everything. Missing days breaks the momentum. Treat auto-suggestion like training a muscle. Daily tension is what creates growth. Hill didn't just theorize, he documented dozens of examples where repeated suggestion created outcomes that seemed impossible. Thomas Edison famously visualized his inventions so vividly that he claimed he could see them working before any part existed. He described this process as imprinting a mental blueprint, which his subconscious would later transform into tangible results. Henry Ford, ridiculed for his dream of mass-producing affordable cars, used autosuggestion daily. He repeated the idea that he would create a vehicle ordinary Americans could buy, despite engineers insisting it couldn't be done. His certainty influenced every decision, attracting the talent and resources that made Ford Motor Company unstoppable. Even Charles Schwab, a steel magnate Hill interviewed, confessed that he talked himself into confidence every morning before walking into the mill. He treated his affirmations as mental armor. These stories proved to Hill that success was not reserved for the lucky or born. It was built by those who mastered the discipline of self-suggestion. Hill insisted that 30 days of disciplined repetition could begin transforming any limiting belief. He taught that the subconscious mind responds to consistency more than intensity. To start, pick one core affirmation tied to your main goal. Write it down in precise positive language and set reminders to practice daily, no exceptions. Each morning, read it aloud with energy. Then spend 5 minutes visualizing yourself living that reality. At night, repeat the process before sleep when the subconscious is most open. Keep a journal tracking observations, changes in mood, opportunities, ideas. This record reinforces progress and makes the invisible visible. Expect resistance. Old beliefs will try to survive. You may feel doubt, boredom, or skepticism. That's normal. Push through. Hill said most people fail because they stop when nothing seems to be happening, but the subconscious is listening even when you don't feel it. By day 30, you'll notice shifts in confidence and focus. That's proof the reprogramming has begun. Hill warned that most people fail at autosuggestion because they treat it like a chore instead of a discipline. The first mistake is repeating affirmations mechanically, without emotion. Flat words lack the power to impress the subconscious. Every statement must be felt, spoken with conviction, as if it were already true. The second error is inconsistency. Skipping days resets momentum. Hill compared this to watering a seed sporadically. Growth dies before roots take hold. He urged practitioners to schedule their rituals the same way they would appointments with a mentor. If you wouldn't cancel a meeting with a billionaire advisor, don't cancel time with your own mind. Third, people sabotage themselves by sharing goals too soon. When you tell skeptics your ambitions, their doubt infects you. Hill advised keeping your focus private until results become undeniable. Finally, many abandon autosuggestion when immediate evidence doesn't appear. But the subconscious operates on its own timeline. What you repeat today may bloom months later. Trust the process. Consistency and faith are the price of transformation. Block 5. Specialized knowledge. Hill was blunt. General knowledge is cheap. Libraries overflow with it, universities trade in it, and almost everyone has more of it than they use. Yet most people remain broke. Why? Because wealth requires specialized knowledge. Insights so focused and applicable that they can solve specific problems for others. He saw this pattern in every successful figure he interviewed. Henry Ford knew little about many subjects, but understood mass production better than anyone alive. Carnegie didn't pretend to be an expert on every detail of steelmaking. He mastered the key processes that scaled production faster than competitors. General knowledge makes you interesting in conversation. Specialized knowledge makes you indispensable in the marketplace. Hill taught that you don't need to know everything. You need to know something, so precisely that others will pay for access to your mind. This is how expertise becomes leverage, and leverage becomes wealth. Hill observed that most people waste years collecting credentials that don't convert into value. The wealthy, by contrast, are ruthless in choosing what to learn. They ask, which skill solves a painful problem for someone with money? If it doesn't, it's just an intellectual hobby. He recommended listing your current knowledge and then studying which industries pay the most for that expertise. For example, if you understand marketing, narrow it further. Maybe you master email copywriting for e-commerce brands. If you're in construction, perhaps you specialize in cost reduction systems that save millions. Your goal is to identify where your interests overlap with demand. Hill called this the sweet spot of wealth creation. When your knowledge directly affects someone's bottom line, you gain bargaining power. And once you prove you can deliver results, your value compounds. The lesson is simple. Learn less, but learn deeper. Become so proficient that replacing you feels impossible. Hill documented countless cases where narrow expertise built empires. Take Thomas Edison. He didn't try to master every scientific discipline. He focused obsessively on practical applications of electricity. That focus led to over 1,000 patents and the creation of entire industries. Another example was John D. Rockefeller. He didn't attempt to control every sector of commerce. He specialized in refining oil and perfecting distribution systems. This single-minded dedication to efficiency let him outmaneuver bigger competitors and build Standard Oil into a monopoly. Even in sales, Hill met professionals who out-earned executives by mastering one technique, like closing high-ticket deals or writing persuasive letters. What made them powerful wasn't volume of information, but depth of understanding. They knew their niche so well that any competitor looked like an amateur by comparison. Hill concluded, "The world rewards those who pick a lane and dominate it." Hill warned that accumulating facts is a seductive trap. Many people collect courses, certificates, and books, mistaking this for progress. But raw information has no market value until it's applied to produce results. He called this intellectual stockpiling, hoarding knowledge you never monetize. In contrast, the wealthy treat learning as an investment with clear expectations. How will this knowledge create income or improve efficiency? If they can't answer, they don't pursue it. Henry Ford was ridiculed for lacking general education. But he built an empire by converting specialized knowledge, assembly line production, into a system competitors couldn't match. He hired smart advisors to fill gaps, but never pretended to be an encyclopedia. Hill taught that the difference between trivia and power is application. You can read about sales psychology for years, but 1 hour spent applying it to close deals is worth more than a library of theory. The question isn't what you know, it's what you can do with what you know. That's the knowledge that pays. Hill believed specialized knowledge should be pursued with urgency. He advised people to treat mastery like an emergency, compress learning timelines, apply immediately, and refine through feedback. One strategy he recommended was the apprenticeship model, working under someone already successful in your chosen field. This accelerates understanding by exposing you to real problems and proven solutions. Another tactic was teaching what you learn as you go. Sharing insights through presentations, articles, or mentoring forces clarity. When you teach, you discover gaps in your own understanding and close them faster. This not only cements expertise, but also positions you as an authority. Hill also stressed continuous learning. Even after achieving success, his subjects kept studying innovations in their niche. They subscribed to industry journals, attended conferences, and invested in new tools. He concluded, "Authority is earned by those who learn faster and apply deeper than everyone around them." In a world drowning in generalists, specialists who never stop growing become irreplaceable. Block 6. Organized planning. Hill declared bluntly, "A goal without a plan is just a wish." He observed that nearly everyone has ambitions, more income, freedom, impact, but almost none translate them into actionable blueprints. The wealthy operate differently. They don't leave progress to inspiration or mood. They build roadmaps, timelines, and contingencies so detailed that action becomes inevitable. He noticed this in every industrial titan he interviewed. Andrew Carnegie mapped growth targets decades ahead. Edison designed experiments methodically, documenting every step. Rockefeller planned acquisitions with military precision, never improvising deals. These men treated planning not as bureaucracy, but as the foundation of power. Hill emphasized that clarity eliminates excuses. A written plan clarifies exactly what to do next and makes procrastination obvious. Without structure, your mind defaults to distraction. With a plan, even small daily steps compound into momentum. That's why he called organized planning the bridge between desire and reality. Without it, even the strongest ambition dies in confusion. Hill outlined 4 stages every serious plan must include. First, definiteness of purpose. Know precisely what you want and why. Vague goals breed vague actions. Write a clear statement: how much money, by when, and for what reason. This anchors your plan in reality. Second, formation of alliances. No plan survives alone. Hill called this the mastermind principle, building a network of people whose skills compensate for your weaknesses. Carnegie attributed his fortune to the team he assembled, not just his own talent. Third, assignment of tasks. Break objectives into actionable steps with deadlines and responsibilities. Hill insisted that clarity reduces friction. If you don't assign clear next actions, plans stall. Finally, continuous revision. No strategy is perfect from the start. Hill advised scheduling regular reviews to measure results, adjust tactics, and re-energize commitment. This loop, plan, act, measure, adapt, separates amateurs from professionals. When applied relentlessly, it transforms desire into predictable achievement. Hill insisted that failure is feedback, not finality. He observed that every wealthy person he studied failed repeatedly, sometimes catastrophically, before winning. Edison's thousands of failed experiments weren't humiliations, they were data. Henry Ford's early bankruptcies didn't destroy him, they refined his strategy. Hill believed that most people collapse at the first setback because they mistake obstacles for signs they aren't meant to succeed. To avoid this trap, he taught that failure should be anticipated in your plan. Expect setbacks. Document them when they occur. What happened, why, and what you'll change next time. This transforms emotion into information. He also advised reframing failure as a test. How serious am I about this goal? If you can answer, more serious than any obstacle, you pass. Finally, he warned, never share failures with people who enjoy seeing you doubt yourself. Surround yourself with allies who see mistakes as lessons, not evidence of defeat. This mental environment makes persistence the default response. Hill observed that flexibility was a universal trait among the successful. They were stubborn about goals but fluid about methods. When a tactic failed, they didn't abandon the mission, they adjusted their approach. He called this persistent adaptability, a mindset that balances commitment with creativity. To apply it, Hill recommended a simple process. When a plan stalls, pause to analyze without emotion. Ask, what did I assume that turned out wrong? Then identify alternative actions that serve the same purpose. Maybe the partnership failed, but another partner is available. Maybe the product launch flopped, but the feedback reveals what people actually want. Crucially, he insisted you never confuse methods with the mission. Your tactics are disposable, your purpose is not. Hill taught that if you can maintain faith in the destination while changing the route as often as needed, you become unshakable. Because most people fail not from lack of desire, but from an inability to pivot when reality demands it. Hill was adamant that a plan without execution is a fantasy. He recommended specific tools to force movement. First, use daily action lists. Not vague intentions, but concrete tasks that advance your main goal. Every evening, write tomorrow's priorities. Every morning, attack them before distractions appear. Second, set public deadlines. Tell your team or trusted allies when you will deliver. This accountability triggers urgency. Hill observed that when people commit openly, they perform with more discipline. Third, track progress visually. Create charts or checklists where you can see momentum building. Visible progress fuels motivation. When setbacks occur, document them alongside lessons learned. This transforms mistakes into data instead of shame. Fourth, schedule regular reviews. Once a week, evaluate what worked, what stalled, and what needs refining. Hill believed this reflection cycle, plan, act, measure, adjust, was the engine of unstoppable progress. Lastly, protect your time. Block hours for uninterrupted focus. Because in a world of endless noise, The power belongs to those who can execute without distraction. Block 7. Decision. Napoleon Hill studied hundreds of millionaires and noticed the same trait: decisiveness. Every titan he interviewed made important choices quickly and rarely changed them without cause. Meanwhile, those who stayed poor hesitated, analyzed endlessly, and waited for certainty that never came. Hill called this the death spiral of indecision. When you pause too long, opportunities decay, competitors move faster, momentum vanishes. Worse, chronic hesitation trains your subconscious to expect failure, because inaction reinforces doubt. Hill observed that indecision is often disguised as prudence, but in reality, it's fear wearing a clever mask. He insisted that wealth favors the person who moves first. Ford committed to mass production when experts laughed. Rockefeller invested in refining before oil was proven. Both men succeeded because they decided with conviction and refined their approach on the move. In Hill's words, indecision is the graveyard of dreams. If you wait for perfect clarity, you'll die waiting. Hill discovered that decisive people share specific habits. First, they cultivate clarity of purpose, because when you know exactly what you want, decisions become simpler. Ambiguity breeds hesitation. Carnegie knew his mission was to dominate steel. Every choice was weighed against that singular aim. If it aligned, he acted. If it didn't, he ignored it. Second, they act quickly on ideas while they're still hot. Momentum is a perishable resource. Hill noticed successful individuals seized inspiration immediately. They didn't wait for consensus. They trusted their instincts, took calculated risks, and adjusted in motion. Third, they accepted responsibility for consequences. This freed them to act boldly without waiting for guarantees. Weak minds look for someone to blame if things go wrong. Decisive minds accept that mistakes are tuition for progress. Hill concluded that decisive behavior isn't a personality trait, it's a discipline. Anyone can train it by reducing overthinking, committing to action, and learning to trust that clarity grows through doing, not waiting. Hill taught that decisiveness is a skill you cultivate through practice. He recommended starting small. Train yourself to make quick decisions on daily choices. What to wear, where to eat, which email to answer first. This builds mental muscle for bigger moves. He also urged setting strict time limits for decisions. For example, when evaluating a new opportunity, give yourself 48 hours to decide. The deadline forces clarity. Hill observed that most people think they need more information. In reality, they need more courage to commit. Another technique is the our first instinct principle. When your intuition points strongly in one direction, act on it before your rational mind creates doubt. Hill's research showed that first impulses are often correct because they arise from subconscious pattern recognition. Finally, document every decision and its outcome. Over time, you'll see patterns in your thinking. This awareness reduces fear of mistakes because you realize decisions compound. Each choice improves your judgment. Action refines instinct, while delay breeds regret. Hill observed that most people disguise fear as research. They convince themselves that gathering endless information is smart, but the reality is that too much analysis kills momentum. He called this mental trap analysis paralysis, a condition where overthinking replaces action. To avoid it, Hill advised limiting how much data you collect before making a choice. Successful people decide based on sufficient information, not perfect information. They know that clarity grows through movement, not contemplation. He recommended the 70% rule. If you have about 70% of the data you think you need, decide and act. Waiting for 100% creates stagnation. Remember, most opportunities have an expiration date. Another antidote is prioritizing speed over perfection. When you act quickly, you can adjust course while others are still debating. Hill wrote, "A mediocre decision executed with conviction is better than a brilliant decision never acted upon." Progress requires courage to move before you feel ready, and faith that you'll adapt once you're in motion. Chat GPT Roterista. Hill believed decisiveness grows with practice. He recommended creating daily rituals that force you to choose without hesitation. Start by making a list of 5 small decisions you will act on immediately each morning, like sending a proposal, confirming an appointment, or delegating a task. Checking them off trains your brain to associate decisiveness with progress. Next, adopt a habit of time boxing. When faced with a choice, set a countdown timer. 5 minutes for minor decisions, 1 hour for bigger ones. This prevents endless loops of doubt. Third, practice decision journaling. After each choice, record why you decided, what you expected, and what happened. Over weeks, you'll see patterns, where you're strong, where you hesitate, and how often your first instinct was right. Finally, celebrate action, not just outcomes. Each decision made, regardless of result, reinforces your identity as someone who moves forward. In Hill's words, your destiny is shaped in moments of decision. The habit of acting without delay creates a life others will call extraordinary. Block 8. Persistence. Hill declared that persistence is the filter separating those who dream from those who finish. He noticed that every multimillionaire he studied had moments when quitting would have been logical, when failure was humiliating, money was gone, and critics were celebrating. But they continued anyway. He wrote that persistence is not an accident. It's a mindset you build intentionally. It's waking up to rejection and returning stronger. It's reapplying for funding after 10 refusals. It's rebuilding after a failed launch. Hill found that most people never fail outright. They simply abandon their goals when progress is slow. The wealthy treat persistence as a habit, not a feeling. They don't wait for motivation. They keep showing up because discipline matters more than emotion. Over time, the world yields to the person who refuses to leave. Hill believed persistence is the rarest and most valuable form of capital because it eventually forces obstacles to surrender. Hill knew that the hardest phase of any endeavor is the stretch where effort seems wasted. You pour in time, money, and heart, and nothing happens. Most people quit here, but those who become legends persist until momentum kicks in. He taught that sustaining energy requires a clear why. You must remind yourself daily why your goal matters more than comfort or approval. He recommended reading your chief aim aloud every morning and night. This repetition rekindles urgency when enthusiasm fades. Second, Hill advised breaking big targets into micro goals. Each small win fuels confidence. For example, if your ambition is to build a business, focus first on getting your first client, then your first testimonial. Small victories compound. Third, Hill emphasized the power of rest. Persistence isn't grinding yourself to dust, it's strategic recovery. Fatigue breeds doubt. He suggested scheduling time away to renew perspective. Lastly, he warned, never measure progress by short-term results. Measure by how consistently you keep showing up. Because eventually effort piles high enough to tip the scales, and when it does, everyone will call you lucky. Hill documented stories of persistence that defied logic. One of his favorites was about Darby, who bought a gold mine during the gold rush. After digging and finding a promising vein, Darby invested heavily. But when the gold vanished a few feet deeper, he panicked, sold the equipment for pennies, and quit. The junk dealer who bought his claim called a mining engineer to inspect it. 3 feet beyond where Darby stopped, they struck one of the richest deposits ever found. That lesson haunted Darby, but he learned from it. He later became a top insurance salesman by vowing never to stop 3 feet from gold again. Every rejection became fuel. Hill used this as proof. Failure is often not the absence of opportunity, but the consequence of stopping too soon. Hill also cited Edison, who tested over 10,000 materials for a light bulb filament. When asked why he didn't quit, Edison replied, "I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 things that won't work." Persistence transformed setbacks into stepping stones. Hill observed that quitting rarely happens in a single moment. It's a slow erosion of commitment, a cycle that repeats until you become someone who expects defeat. First comes the excitement of a new goal. You take action. When results don't appear quickly, doubt creeps in. You start listening to skeptics. Momentum fades. Eventually, you justify stopping. The tragedy is that most people never question this pattern. They call it being realistic. But Hill taught that realism without persistence is surrender. To break the cycle, you must pre-commit. Decide that you will keep going past the discomfort point. Write a contract with yourself that quitting is not an option for at least 6 months. Second, limit exposure to negative voices. Hill called them dream thieves. Even one cynic can plant seeds of resignation. Finally, track your actions, not just results. When progress feels invisible, your record proves you're advancing. Over time, discipline becomes identity, and the cycle of quitting dissolves. Hill believed persistence wasn't just about grit in a crisis, it was about constructing a mindset that endures for years. First, he advised making your goal public to people you respect. When you declare your ambition, social pressure reinforces your resolve. You don't want to be seen as someone who quits easily. Second, Hill recommended creating a visual reminder, a card, poster, or screensaver that displays your main objective. This constant exposure programs your subconscious to expect achievement. Third, schedule regular reviews. Every month, measure progress and recalibrate strategy. Reflection prevents drifting and keeps motivation fresh. Fourth, build a mastermind of trusted allies who refuse to let you abandon your path. Hill observed that persistent individuals rarely operate alone. When your energy dips, the group's support restores momentum. Lastly, practice emotional detachment. When setbacks occur, treat them as data, not identity. Hill wrote, "Persistence is the twin sister of faith. Where one exists, the other will be found. If you persist long enough, the world runs out of reasons to deny you." Block 9. The Mastermind. Hill discovered that no empire was built in isolation. Every tycoon he studied formed alliances with other ambitious individuals. He called this phenomenon the mastermind principle, a coordination of knowledge, resources, and energy between 2 or more people working toward a shared goal. Hill believed a true mastermind generates a third mind, a force of creativity and problem-solving beyond what any individual could achieve alone. He observed that when minds unite with trust and purpose, ideas multiply and obstacles shrink. Carnegie attributed much of his fortune to his team of trusted advisors who compensated for his blind spots. Edison had a network of skilled engineers who refined his concepts. Even Henry Ford relied on associates who challenged him to improve. Hill concluded that while desire and discipline ignite success, the mastermind sustains it. The synergy of minds accelerates progress, creates accountability, and fuels resilience. No matter how talented you are, greatness demands collaboration. Hill taught that not everyone qualifies for your mastermind. A strategic ally must possess 2 qualities: specialized knowledge and shared ambition. You don't need people who simply agree with you. You need those who bring different strengths and hold you accountable. Start by listing individuals who excel in areas where you're weaker. Maybe you're creative but disorganized. Look for someone skilled in execution. If you're technically proficient but lack sales ability, find a partner who thrives in persuasion. Second, evaluate character. Hill warned that even brilliant minds can sabotage progress if they lack integrity. Trust is non-negotiable. He advised spending time observing potential allies in action before formalizing any collaboration. Watch how they handle setbacks, conflict, and praise. Finally, consider alignment of values. Shared vision creates cohesion when stress rises. If your goals diverge too far, the alliance fractures. Hill believed the right mastermind feels like an extension of your own mission, a collective will that refuses to quit. Hill emphasized that a mastermind is not a casual network or a friendly chat. It is a deliberate, structured alliance designed to create momentum no individual can sustain alone. He outlined key elements that transform a group into a true mastermind. First, definite purpose. Every member must be committed to a clear objective. This shared mission focuses collective energy. Second, harmony. No ego battles or hidden agendas. Discord drains the creative power Hill considered essential. Third, Regular meetings. The group must meet consistently, weekly or bi-weekly, to share progress, brainstorm solutions, and hold each other accountable. Hill insisted that confidentiality is sacred. Members must feel safe revealing setbacks and ideas without fear of judgment or exploitation. Finally, a true mastermind leverages diversity of skill. When everyone brings unique strengths, the third mind emerges, an intelligence greater than the sum of its parts. This synergy, Hill argued, is often the hidden engine behind lasting success. Hill knew that even the best alliances can collapse without discipline. He observed that many groups start with enthusiasm but disintegrate when consistency fades or egos interfere. To prevent this, he recommended setting clear rules from the outset. Decide how often you'll meet, how progress will be measured, and how disagreements will be resolved. Document these agreements so expectations remain visible. He also stressed the importance of punctuality and preparation. Every session should have an agenda. Members must arrive ready to report wins, challenges, and next steps. This ritual creates momentum and reinforces commitment. Trust, Hill insisted, is the lifeblood of a mastermind. Protect it by honoring confidentiality. Never share details outside the group. If conflict arises, resolve it quickly and respectfully. When handled well, disagreements can deepen respect instead of eroding it. Finally, celebrate collective wins. Recognition strengthens bonds. Hill wrote, "The mastermind thrives on harmony, discipline, and shared purpose. Without them, it is only a meeting." Hill loved to illustrate the mastermind principle with real examples. One of his favorites was the alliance between Henry Ford and Thomas Edison. Ford credited Edison's encouragement as the catalyst for launching his automotive vision. Their mutual respect and combined knowledge accelerated Ford's rise from an unknown mechanic to an industrial legend. Another example was Andrew Carnegie's Mastermind Cabinet, a group of close advisors with expertise in finance, operations, and law. Carnegie openly admitted he knew little about the technical side of steel production, but by uniting specialists under a shared mission, he built the most profitable steel enterprise of his era. Hill also cited the Wright brothers, whose tiny team combined engineering ingenuity with relentless experimentation. Their collective focus cracked the code of powered flight, something larger, better-funded institutions failed to achieve. These stories reinforced Hill's conviction. When you surround yourself with skilled, trustworthy minds, you create a force no competitor can match. The mastermind isn't just collaboration, it's multiplied intelligence. Block 10. Sexual transmutation. Among all the principles Hill documented, sexual transmutation was the most misunderstood and the most powerful. He defined it as the process of redirecting sexual energy into productive drive. Hill observed that the same life force that fuels desire, romance, and attraction also fuels ambition and creativity when channeled consciously. He noticed that many high achievers possessed a strong sexual nature. But rather than being distracted by constant indulgence, they converted that intensity into work. Napoleon Bonaparte, for example, was known for his passion as much as his military genius. Hill argued this wasn't a coincidence. Sexual energy is one of the strongest human impulses. If you let it scatter into temporary gratification, it drains willpower. But if you discipline it, if you transmute it, it becomes a volcanic engine of achievement. He knew this idea made people uncomfortable, but he insisted that mastering this principle was a hidden edge that separated ordinary performers from the truly unstoppable. Hill argued that sexual energy is the most potent form of human vitality. It's the drive that makes people pursue, conquer, and create. In his research, he noticed that leaders who achieved extraordinary feats didn't suppress this energy. They redirected it. Instead of wasting it on endless indulgence, they focused it on their work, their vision, and their legacy. He described how the same excitement that fuels romantic desire can be harnessed as an internal current of motivation. It sharpens focus, heightens creativity, and amplifies determination. Hill observed that men often accomplish their greatest work after falling in love, not because of romance itself, but because desire activates latent reserves of energy. When this force is disciplined, it feeds persistence. He believed the ability to transform sexual energy into productive obsession explains why some people maintain stamina others can't comprehend. In Hill's view, transmutation is the secret reservoir that powers lasting achievement when others burn out. Hill often pointed to Thomas Edison, who credited his tireless energy to channeling personal passion into innovation. Edison worked up to 20 hours a day, driven by a force he described as burning enthusiasm. Hill believed this was sexual energy, transmuted into creative obsession. He also studied Henry Ford, whose disciplined lifestyle avoided scandalous distractions. Ford's intense focus on perfecting mass production was, in Hill's words, a redirection of primal drive. Rather than dissipate energy in fleeting pleasures, he built an empire that redefined transportation. Even Napoleon Bonaparte, famous for romantic conquests, was an example of applied transmutation. His passion didn't weaken his ambition, it fueled campaigns across Europe. Hill wrote that Napoleon's vigor in love and war were two sides of the same current. These stories prove to Hill that sexual transmutation isn't theoretical. It's a hidden discipline practiced by many giants of industry and conquest, men who learn to convert raw desire into unstoppable momentum. Hill emphasized that sexual transmutation is not repression, it's transformation. You don't deny desire, you discipline it. Today, this principle is applied in ways Hill never imagined, but the core remains the same. Athletes practice abstinence before competitions to preserve focus. Entrepreneurs schedule periods of celibacy during critical launches. Creatives use visualization and meditation to convert longing into inspiration. One practical method is goal anchoring. When you feel intense desire, immediately redirect that energy by visualizing your most important objective. Attach the surge of emotion to the vision of success. Over time, the brain learns to associate arousal with productivity. Another strategy is structured routine. Hill observed that idle time is fertile ground for distraction. By keeping a full calendar of purposeful action, you naturally reroute energy into projects. He also recommended exercise to transmute tension into physical vitality. The key, Hill insisted, is awareness. When you recognize this energy as fuel rather than temptation, you unlock a reservoir of power most never access. Hill warned that while sexual energy can be transformed into greatness, it can also be the most destructive force if mismanaged. He called uncontrolled indulgence a psychic leak that drains ambition, clarity, and resilience. Many promising careers, he observed, collapsed under the weight of secret addictions and impulsive entanglements. To protect this energy, Hill advised practicing selective association. Be deliberate about relationships. Surround yourself with people who elevate your purpose rather than distract you. Second, set clear boundaries. If you know certain environments or habits trigger distraction, design your life to avoid them. Third, cultivate creative outlets. When desire builds, channel it into writing, building, or learning. This reframes the impulse as fuel, not temptation. Hill believed this discipline was a hidden hallmark of every empire builder he studied. Finally, remember his warning. Sexual energy is nature's strongest force. Master it, and it will carry you farther than talent or luck ever could. Fail to master it, and it will consume everything you hope to build. Block 11. The subconscious mind as servant. Hill believed the subconscious mind is a loyal servant that never questions instructions. Whatever you repeatedly think and feel, whether positive or negative, becomes the code it executes. He compared it to fertile soil. Plant weeds of doubt and fear, and they'll grow. Sow seeds of confidence and clarity, and you harvest success. He stressed that the subconscious doesn't filter for truth. If you constantly tell yourself, "I can't sell," it accepts that as reality and builds behaviors to confirm it. If you say, "I am unstoppable," it equally commits to proving you right. This is why Hill insisted you must monitor your thoughts as vigilantly as a banker guards a vault. Every idea you dwell on eventually expresses itself in habits, decisions, and results. He called this the automation of destiny. Once you understand that the subconscious will carry out whatever it's fed, you realize you're never a victim. You are the programmer, and your life is the printout of those commands. Hill observed that most people unconsciously hypnotize themselves into failure. They dwell on fear, scarcity, and resentment until these thoughts harden into beliefs. Those beliefs then shape every choice they make, creating the very conditions they feared. He called this process negative autosuggestion. For example, if you constantly say, "How no one wants what I'm selling," your subconscious accepts this as law. You'll then act without confidence, project uncertainty, and repel customers, proving your belief true. The cycle repeats until you can't tell the difference between perception and reality. He'll emphasize that the subconscious doesn't care whether your thoughts are constructive or destructive. It only responds to repetition and emotion. The more often you rehearse defeat in your mind, the faster it becomes fact. This is why he insisted you must intercept negative self-talk immediately. Replacing it with affirmations isn't about blind optimism. It's about breaking a pattern that otherwise guarantees mediocrity. Hill taught that reprogramming the subconscious isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong discipline. He recommended several daily practices to embed empowering beliefs. First, morning declarations. Start each day by reading your definite chief aim aloud with conviction. This sets the mental tone before the world can impose its noise. Second, use emotional visualization. Don't just imagine your goals as distant possibilities. See them as present facts. Feel the excitement and gratitude of achievement. This emotional charge accelerates belief formation. Third, guard your mental diet. Hill insisted that negative conversations, news, and gossip act like contaminants in fertile soil. Limit exposure to sources that fuel fear or envy. Fourth, record your progress. Keeping a daily journal of small wins reinforces the identity of someone who achieves. Finally, end each night reviewing your goals and affirmations. Repetition at bedtime sinks deepest because the subconscious is most receptive. This ritual, done consistently, transforms your default thoughts from doubt to certainty, and certainty attracts results. Hill argued that controlling your emotions is the fastest way to control your subconscious programming. He noticed that fear and anger create the strongest negative impressions. When you react impulsively, you burn those feelings into your mental operating system, making future calm even harder to access. To maintain discipline, Hill recommended pause and pattern. When triggered, pause before reacting, then replace the impulse with a predetermined response. For example, if you feel fear, pause, take a deep breath, and repeat, "This is temporary, and I am capable." Over time, this rewires your instinctive reactions. He also urged people to avoid toxic environments. If you spend time around chronic complainers or panicked co-workers, their emotions will infect yours. Emotional discipline sometimes requires physical distance. Finally, Hill taught that gratitude neutralizes negativity. By focusing on what's working, even in crisis, you signal to your subconscious that you remain in control. This mindset creates the stability needed to build wealth and influence. Hill concluded that success is a cycle with 3 interlocking stages: belief, action, and reception. First, belief. You must convince your subconscious that your goal is inevitable. This doesn't happen once. It requires daily reinforcement until the conviction feels unshakable. Second, action. Repetition alone is not enough. Every thought must translate into behavior. If you affirm abundance but take no steps to create value, your mind recognizes the contradiction and reverts to old patterns. Consistent action cements belief. Third, reception. Most people block success by secretly believing they don't deserve it. Hill taught that when you achieve results, you must accept them without guilt. This acceptance completes the loop, confirming to your subconscious that the process works. Over time, each cycle of believing, acting, and receiving builds momentum. The mind grows accustomed to winning. Doubt loses its grip. Hill called this the habit of achievement, a mental state where success becomes predictable because your subconscious expects nothing less. This is the final mastery, programming your mind to deliver what you once thought impossible. The final lesson from Napoleon Hill. You've just heard the principles that Napoleon Hill spent a lifetime extracting from the world's greatest fortunes. Not theories, not comforting stories. The raw patterns of action, belief, and discipline that separate the exceptional from the ordinary. Most people will close this video and slip back into the same habits, the same excuses, the same comfortable mediocrity. But if you understand what Hill discovered, you know the truth. Wealth isn't luck, it's engineered. And the blueprint is now in your hands. So here's your choice. You can keep waiting for the perfect time, the perfect resources, the perfect certainty that never arrives. Or you can decide today that you will act, persist, and reprogram your mind until success feels inevitable, because in the end, Hill proved one thing beyond all doubt. Every fortune begins in the same place, a mind that refuses to quit. If this inspired you, subscribe now. Share this with someone who still believes success is magic. And remember, the world rewards those who learn the rules and play them better than anyone else. This is your moment. Start the work.